Something happened 48 hours ago that will affect every single American who drives a car, heats a home, or buys groceries at a supermarket. And the White House is doing everything possible to make sure you don't find out until it's too late. In a heavily guarded palace compound in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sat down with representatives from Russia and China to sign an agreement that fundamentally restructures the global oil market. No American officials were present. No American media was invited. The meeting wasn't announced until after it concluded. And what they agreed to will change the price you pay for gasoline for the rest of your life. I'm not talking about a few cents per gallon. I'm talking about structural changes to how oil is produced, priced, and traded. That will make $4 gas look like a nostalgic memory by the end of this summer. Here's what actually happened in that room and why the energy industry is panicking while the White House pretends everything is fine. The meeting began at 9:00 p.m. local time on Tuesday at the Al Yama Palace in Riyadh. Present were Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, and Chinese Vice Premier Ding Jiakang. No press pool, no official photographers except Saudi state media, which released a single carefully staged image 12 hours after the meeting concluded. No readout of what was discussed, but sources within Saudi Aramco have revealed the framework of what was agreed. The agreement has three components. Each one is devastating for American consumers. Component one, production coordination. Saudi Arabia, Russia, and China agreed to a new production framework that goes far beyond existing OPEC Plus arrangements. Under this agreement, Saudi Arabia and Russia will coordinate production cuts totaling 3.5 million barrels per day through the end of 2026. To put that in perspective, global oil markets operate on extremely thin margins. Daily global consumption is approximately 103 million barrels. Daily production is approximately 103.5 million barrels. That 500,000 barrel surplus is what keeps prices relatively stable. Remove 3.5 million barrels from daily production, and you don't create a small shortage, you create a crisis. Component two, pricing mechanism. This is the part that should terrify every American. For 50 years, global oil has been priced in US dollars. When Saudi Arabia sells oil to Japan, the transaction happens in dollars. When Russia sells oil to India, dollars. When anyone buys oil from anyone, dollars. This system, called the petrodollar, is the foundation of American economic dominance. It forces every country on earth to hold massive dollar reserves, which keeps demand for dollars high and allows America to run enormous deficits without consequence. The Riyadh Agreement establishes a parallel pricing mechanism. Starting in September, Saudi Arabia will accept Chinese yuan for oil purchases from Asian buyers. Russia already accepts yuan and rubles. Together, they're creating an alternative to dollar-denominated oil trading. This doesn't kill the petrodollar overnight, but it begins the process. And once that process starts, it cannot be reversed. Component three, strategic reserve coordination. China has been building the largest strategic petroleum reserve in history, an estimated 950 million barrels stored in underground caverns and above-ground tank farms across the country. Under the Riyadh Agreement, Saudi Arabia and Russia will prioritize Chinese reserve purchases during any supply disruption. Translation: if there's a shortage, China gets oil first. America waits in line. Let me explain exactly what these numbers mean for the price you'll pay at the pump. Current oil prices are approximately $78 per barrel for Brent crude, the global benchmark. But oil markets are incredibly sensitive to supply changes. A 1% reduction in global supply typically produces a 5 to 7% increase in prices. That's the historical pattern from every supply disruption since the 1973 oil embargo. The Riyadh Agreement removes 3.5 million barrels per day. That's a 3.4% reduction in global supply. Using standard market models, that translates to a 17-24% increase in crude oil prices. Brent crude moving from $78 to somewhere between $91 and $97 per barrel. At $95 per barrel crude, refinery economics push gasoline prices to approximately $410 per gallon nationally. Some states, California, Hawaii, Nevada, would see prices above $550. But that's the baseline scenario that assumes no market panic, no speculative buying, no supply disruption from conflict or accident. Here's what happens in the realistic scenario. When traders learn about coordinated production cuts of this magnitude, they don't wait for prices to rise gradually. They buy futures contracts immediately, bidding up prices in anticipation of future scarcity. This creates a speculative premium that amplifies the underlying supply shortage. During the 2022 oil price spike following Russia's Ukraine invasion, speculative premiums added approximately $25 per barrel. If similar speculation occurs, and it will, crude could reach $115, $120 per barrel by late summer. At $120 per barrel crude, gasoline prices reach $5.25 per gallon nationally. California crosses $7. Every state east of the Mississippi sees prices above $450. And here's the number the White House definitely doesn't want you to know. The U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve, our emergency oil stockpile, currently holds approximately 370 million barrels. That's the lowest level since 1983. At normal consumption rates, that reserve provides roughly 19 days of supply. 19 days. That's our buffer against a coordinated supply disruption by three of the world's largest oil producers. The White House response to the Riyadh meeting has been carefully crafted misdirection. National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby acknowledged the meeting but dismissed concerns about its implications. We're aware that Saudi, Russian, and Chinese officials met in Riyadh to discuss energy cooperation, Kirby said at Thursday's briefing. We don't have specific details on what was discussed, but we have confidence in the stability of global oil markets and America's energy security. Let me translate that from diplomatic speak to English. We're aware means they were caught off guard. If the White House had advanced notice of this meeting, they would have said so. They didn't know it was happening until Saudi state media released the photo. We don't have specific details means either American intelligence failed to penetrate the meeting or they know exactly what happened and are lying about it. Neither interpretation is reassuring. We have confidence in the stability of global oil markets, is the exact phrase White House officials used in January 2022, 2 months before oil prices spiked 65% following the Ukraine invasion. Here's what Kirby didn't say. He didn't say the production cuts won't happen because they will. He didn't say the yuan pricing mechanism won't be implemented because it will be. He didn't say gas prices won't increase because they will. He changed the subject to energy security, a vague concept that means nothing when three countries controlling 35% of global oil production decide to reduce supply and bypass the dollar. Meanwhile, oil markets are already reacting. Brent crude futures for September delivery jumped 4.2% on Thursday, the largest single-day move in 3 months. West Texas Intermediate, the American benchmark, rose 3.8%. Energy sector ETFs are up 6% in 2 days. Wall Street knows what's coming. They're buying oil stocks and selling consumer discretionary stocks. Retailers, restaurants, travel companies, they get crushed when gas prices spike. The money is moving. The only people who don't know what's happening are American consumers who trust White House press briefings. And it gets worse, much worse. The Riyadh agreement isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a coordinated strategy by America's adversaries to restructure the global economic order. 2 weeks ago, BRICS nations announced a new commodities exchange that will allow member nations to trade oil, natural gas, and minerals in local currencies. 1 week ago, Saudi Arabia officially applied for BRICS membership. Their application was fast-tracked and approved within 72 hours. 3 days ago, the Riyadh meeting formalized Saudi Arabia's pivot away from its 70-year alliance with the United States. This is not coincidence. This is coordination. The petrodollar system has been the foundation of American economic power since 1974, when Henry Kissinger negotiated an agreement with King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia would price all oil in dollars and invest oil revenues in American Treasury bonds. In exchange, America would guarantee Saudi security. That 50-year partnership is ending, and nobody in Washington saw it coming. Mohammed bin Salman has been sending signals for years that American analysts ignored or dismissed. In 2018, MBS told Bloomberg that Saudi Arabia didn't need America's security guarantee anymore. Analysts dismissed it as negotiating posture. In 2022, Saudi Arabia refused American requests to increase oil production to counter Russian supply disruptions. Analysts called it a temporary disagreement. In 2023, Saudi Arabia normalized relations with Iran, America's primary adversary in the region, in a deal brokered by China. Analysts said it was pragmatic regional diplomacy. Now, Saudi Arabia is signing secret agreements with Russia and China to restructure global oil markets at America's expense. What do analysts say now? They're saying the obvious truth that should have been recognized years ago. Saudi Arabia has chosen sides and they didn't choose America. Energy analysts are issuing warnings that the mainstream financial media is barely covering. Bob McKeon called the Riyadh Agreement the most significant shift in global energy politics since the 1973 oil embargo. We're witnessing the deliberate restructuring of the global oil order by countries that view American dominance as a problem to be solved. This isn't about short-term price movements. This is about who controls the most important commodity market on Earth. Daniel Jergen, Pulitzer Prize-winning energy historian, was more blunt. The petrodollar system gave America extraordinary economic privileges for half a century. Jergen said, "What we're seeing now is a coordinated effort by major oil producers to claw back those privileges. The transition will be painful for American consumers and potentially destabilizing for the global financial system." And here's the assessment that should truly alarm every American. Jan Stewart argued that sustained oil prices above $100 per barrel would trigger recession in the United States. Consumer spending is the engine of the American economy. When gas prices spike, consumers cut spending elsewhere. The pattern is consistent across every oil shock since 1973. High oil prices precede recession every time. The Riyadh Agreement guarantees oil prices above $100 per barrel by fall, guaranteeing economic pain for American families. Let me be specific about what you'll experience over the next 6 months. June, gas prices begin rising. The national average moves from $3.45 to approximately $3.85 per gallon. Most consumers notice but aren't alarmed. July, summer driving demand combines with reduced supply. The national average crosses $4.25 per gallon. Airlines increase fuel surcharges. Shipping costs rise. Grocery prices tick up as transportation costs flow through supply chains. August, speculative buying peaks. The national average reaches $4.75 per gallon. Some states cross $5.50. Consumer confidence drops. Retail sales slow. Economists begin discussing recession risk. September, WAN pricing mechanism goes live. Dollar demand softens. Oil prices hit $110, $150 per barrel. National gas average reaches $5.15 per gallon. The Federal Reserve faces an impossible choice: raise rates or cut rates. October, election month. Gas prices become the dominant political issue. The administration releases strategic petroleum reserve barrels, providing temporary relief. Markets recognize this as panic, not policy. Prices resume climbing after the reserve release ends. November and beyond, a new normal establishes. Gas prices stabilize between $4.50 and $5.50 per gallon. American consumers adapt by driving less, buying smaller vehicles, and cutting discretionary spending. Economic growth slows. The era of cheap energy that powered American prosperity for decades quietly ends. This isn't speculation. This is what supply-demand economics dictates. When 3.5 million barrels per day disappear from global production, the Biden administration faces an impossible situation. Option 1, confront Saudi Arabia publicly, demand they reverse the production cuts, and threaten consequences. This risks accelerating Saudi Arabia's departure from the American orbit and triggering immediate supply reductions. Option 2, negotiate quietly. Offer concessions to bring Saudi Arabia back into alignment. This requires giving MBS something he wants while appearing weak to domestic audiences during an election year. Option 3, increase domestic production to offset Saudi cuts. This contradicts climate policy goals, faces infrastructure constraints that can't be solved quickly, and wouldn't produce meaningful additional barrels for 12-18 months anyway. Option 4, release strategic petroleum reserve barrels to suppress prices temporarily. The reserve is already at 40-year lows. Further releases leave America dangerously exposed to actual supply emergencies. And markets note reserve releases are temporary, so prices resume climbing once releases end. There are no good options, only bad options and worse options. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was asked about dollar stability at an event Thursday. Her answer was revealing. The dollar remains the world's reserve currency, and we see no immediate threat to that status, Yellen said. Notice the word immediate, not no threat. That qualifier is doing a lot of work. It suggests Yellen knows the threat is real, just not immediate. But oil markets don't wait for threats to become immediate. They price future expectations today, and today the expectation is that the dollar's role in oil markets is diminishing. Here's the reality that no one in Washington wants to admit. The era of American energy dominance is ending, not because America ran out of oil, but because the countries that control global supply have decided they no longer want to play by American rules. For 50 years, the petrodollar gave America extraordinary privileges. We could print money to pay for imports. We could run massive deficits without consequence. We could sanction adversaries by cutting them off from dollar-based trade. Those privileges depended on Saudi Arabia's willingness to price oil in dollars and invest petrodollar revenues in American assets. 48 hours ago, Saudi Arabia signaled that willingness has ended. The meeting in Riyadh wasn't about oil production, it was about power. Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia looked at the global order America built and decided to build something different, something that doesn't depend on American permission, something that doesn't flow through American banks, something that doesn't benefit American consumers at everyone else's expense. The price you pay for gasoline is just the most visible symptom of this shift. Behind it lies a fundamental restructuring of global economic power that will affect everything from mortgage rates to grocery prices. And the American political system, consumed by culture wars and partisan theatrics, is completely unprepared to address it. The secret deal is done. The production cuts are coming. The WAN pricing mechanism goes live in September. The petrodollar's slow death has begun. And the gas price you saw this morning, enjoy it. Take a picture. Show it to your children someday as a relic of an era. Because based on what happened in that palace in Riyadh, that price will never be that low again. Subscribe and hit notifications. The gas price story is just beginning. What happens next will shock you even further.